Some stories don't begin with thunderclaps, nor end with applause. They begin in silence. A sigh, a half-closed door, an old dog with cloudy eyes and a past no one bothered to ask about. And a man, also old, also quiet, with too much to forget and not enough reasons to remember. Diego wasn't looking for anyone. He only came to the shelter that day because of a restless sleep. And a voice in his head that whispered, "Sometimes, healing doesn't come from medicine, but from a soul that knows how to sit beside you in silence." And then, he met Rex. No barking, no playful gestures, no attempt to look cute. Rex simply sat there, looking at him with tired eyes. Nothing remarkable, but also impossible to walk away from. So Diego took Rex home. He didn't know why, wasn't sure what they were supposed to do with each other. Only that, in the silence of two beings long abandoned by the world, they found something neither dared believe they still deserved: unconditional presence. This is not a story about a heroic dog. There are no awards, no slow-motion scene of leaping into fire. Only a soul once shattered, who learned to quietly stand beside another's pain, and through that silence, stir back to life the heartbeat thought long forgotten in dozens of hearts. This is the story of Rex and Diego, and those who once just needed someone to sit beside them in silence. If you'd like me to continue telling that story, sit down, don't rush, just breathe. Rex will begin any moment now. I once swore I would never get another dog. After Rusty, my golden retriever, passed away in my arms 2 years ago, I shut my heart completely. The house became too quiet. So quiet that even the wind slipping through the doorframe made me turn, thinking it was his footsteps. At every meal, I still accidentally dropped a piece of egg as if he were still lying under the table, waiting. And every morning, I still looked at his old dog bed, not knowing why I hadn't thrown it away. That day, I went to the shelter as an excuse. Just to look. I told my younger brother when he kept urging me to open up again. In truth, I just wanted to prove that I wasn't ready. My eyes scanned the rows of metal kennels. Dogs barking thunderously, a chaotic symphony of abandoned lives. I was about to leave when one kennel in the far corner made me stop. Kennel number 19. Inside that steel cage was a creature that didn't bark, didn't move, just quietly looked at me. And then, as some kind of instinctual defense mechanism, I blurted out, "If that dog bites me, I swear I'm suing the whole shelter." A gruff statement, mostly meant to protect myself from myself. A woman mopping the floor nearby turned around, raising an eyebrow. "He won't bite," she said, not sharply. "Just certain. He's just different." Different. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Having volunteered at several shelters before, I knew what different meant. It meant he'd been here too long. It meant the staff had run out of gentler ways to describe him. It meant no one wanted him, and no one knew how to fix him. I walked toward the kennel, no real reason. He, or rather, Rex, still didn't move. His fur was a scorched gray and pale yellow, matted like steel wool, hanging unevenly around his ears and thinning out along his flanks, making him look like someone had tried to turn a mop into a wolf but gave up halfway. One of Rex's eyes was clouded, dull like dusty glass, but the other eye, glowing gold, quietly followed me. No fear, no anger, just observation. "What's your name?" I asked. The woman shrugged. "Tag says Rex." He came in with that name. No chip, no records, nothing. Rex. It sounded like the name of an old king lost in the wilderness. Didn't quite fit, but I wasn't there to rename a dog. I just stood there, silent, eyes locked with that lightning bright eye in the middle of a storm. Rex didn't growl, didn't shy away, he simply watched me like he was waiting for something. And I, a man who swore he'd never own another dog, didn't walk away. I crouched down, eyes peering through the bars. "Hi, Rex," I said, calling that name for the first time. Still no sound, no tail wag, no movement, but there was one thing: his tag. It wasn't a regular ID tag. It was a round metal disc, worn down by time. Something was etched into it, but blurred by dust and years. I turned on my phone flashlight and shined it across. My heart clenched. On the front, it read, "If you're reading this, I was loved once." I swallowed hard. That line felt like a quiet cry for help. Buried beneath rust, but still alive. "Let's go, Rex, I whispered. We're getting out of here. And that was the moment every old vow I made shattered like a crack reaching the heart. The woman who had been mopping the floor earlier came back, carrying a ring of keys dangling from her hip. She stopped next to me, her eyes catching the light of my flashlight shining on Rex's tag. That's the only reason we haven't put him down, she said, her voice softer now, like a confession. That tag. No one really knows who left it or why. But I didn't wait for her to finish. I'm sure. I cut in. Opened the kennel for me. She looked at me as if checking whether I truly understood what I was doing. But then, without saying another word, she bent down and slid the key into the lock. The sound of metal clicking echoed through the already quiet space of Kennel 19. The iron gate creaked open with a faint screech. I stepped back half a pace. Instinctively, still feeling traces of the unease from my earlier joke. But Rex didn't rush out. No lunging, no shaking himself off. He simply stood up, like an old man with stiff joints, and walked out of the kennel. One step at a time. Slow but steady. The entire row of kennels seemed to fall silent. The other dogs, who had been barking madly before, now watched quietly, as if they knew something special was happening. Rex stopped beside me. Didn't touch me. Didn't nuzzle my leg, just stood next to me. I crouched down, my hand hovering above his head for a moment, hesitant. Then I placed my hand down, very gently. Rex didn't flinch, didn't close his eyes. A wave of soft fur pressed against my palm. And at that moment, I felt a slight wag of the tail, just brushing my ankle. Like a whisper, I'm ready. Outside, the winter sun was like a blade, cold and sharp, casting the streets in a blinding and stinging light. I opened the truck door, leaving the passenger seat empty, as if waiting for an old friend. Hop in, I said. You're not heavy. I've carried sacks of cement before. Rex didn't look at me like I was crazy. He just stepped in. One step, two steps, neatly, like he'd been riding in cars all his life. He curled up on the seat like a breathing ball of yarn. We drove home in silence. No barking, no whining, just the sound of his steady breathing, soft, rhythmic, alive, like the ticking of a fairy tale clock. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that an old dog, a worn brass tag, and a quiet golden eye had pierced through the stone wall I had built over 2 years. And I also knew, when you read a message that says someone was loved once, you can't turn away. The house greeted us with its familiar silence. No clicking paws on the wooden floor. No wildly wagging tail. No Rusty waiting by the door like I'd imagined for the past 2 years. Rex walked in without needing to be led. No hesitation. No excitement. He just walked, as if the house wasn't foreign to him. He sniffed around the living room, touched his nose to every corner, brushed past the bookshelves and the armchair by the window. Then, as if guided by some invisible strain, he stopped in front of Rusty's old bed. I stood still. I had kept that bed because I didn't have the courage to throw it out. Even though the fabric had frayed. Even though no one had smelled it in years except the dust. Rex didn't need permission. He stepped up, turned in a slow circle, and lay down, with a sigh. A sigh that carried old age, long journeys, and an entire life no one ever fully understood. I sat on the sofa, coffee in hand, but didn't take a sip. I just sat there, watching this strange creature occupy a space I once thought no one could ever fill. That night, Rex didn't whimper, didn't bark, didn't pace like most dogs new to a home. He just lay still, breathing steadily, occasionally twitching an ear, as if catching a sound beyond the window, then sleeping again. The next morning, I woke early, out of habit. Not because of an alarm. I made eggs and a few slices of bacon. Set the plate on the table and looked down. Rex sat a few steps away. Not begging, not jumping, just sitting, waiting. You're quite the gentleman, I said. He didn't respond, just gave a slight ear twitch. I finished eating before portioning out some egg into a metal bowl and placing it on the floor. Rex walked over and ate slowly, making barely a sound beyond the faint clink of metal, as if he were afraid to disturb the peace of the kitchen. By the third day, he started following me from room to room. Not sticking too close, not being a nuisance, just following. Like a thoughtful shadow. When I went into the bathroom, he lay outside the door. When I stepped into the garage, he waited at the threshold, eyes never leaving me for even a second. Not out of fear of being left, but as if he'd been left too many times to still believe people would come back. On the fourth morning, I decided to bathe Rex. It wasn't easy. His matted fur clumped like knots. Water slid over it, but the dust clung on like the years themselves. But I was patient. I poured warm water, used my hands to gently work through each tangled patch. And then, beneath the gray sludge, a coat of golden brown emerged, streaked with faint white like embers glowing beneath ash. Rex looked at least 10 kilos lighter once he was dry. "You're not a mop dog," I muttered. "You're gold covered in dust." Rex glanced over slightly. His tail flicked once. I don't know why, but I felt lighter after that bath. As if something inside me had been washed clean too. Some empty space in this house, and in my heart, had begun to breathe again. And its name was Rex. That night, I dug out an old box hidden in the closet, the one that held Rusty's little things I never had the courage to throw away. There were photos, a few thank you cards from neighbors after Rusty helped their kids through panic attacks. A torn piece of fabric from the volunteer vest I used to wear with him when we visited the nursing home. And there was a frayed tennis ball, the one thing Rusty never refused. Even in his final days, I didn't know what I meant to do. I just tossed the ball across the room, letting it roll slowly over the wooden floor. Rex watched it. He didn't jump, didn't bark, just watched. Then, very slowly, he stood up, walked over, and nudged the ball back toward me with his nose. Not hard, not precise, but enough. I laughed, a sudden, genuine laugh that startled even me. It wasn't the kind of laugh you hear in movies or at loud parties. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you no longer remember how long you've been sad. Rex wagged his tail, this time more clearly, more strongly. I tapped the ball gently back. He stepped forward, nudged it again. The second time, the third. We didn't say anything. No one needed to. We just played. And it wasn't about the ball, it was playing with memories. With joy long lost, with a part of myself I thought would never return. A week later, I decided to take Rex for a full checkup. The vet, an older woman with a smile as light as a spring breeze, ran her hands down Rex's back. Checked his joints, teeth, ears, heart. "This guy's old," she said. "Probably 10, maybe older." I nodded. I knew that. But he's healthy. Clearly been through some bad stuff. But nothing serious going on. A good old man. Just needs some calcium, joint support, and love. I chuckled. That last one, I'm still relearning. On the way home, I glanced at Rex stretched out in the passenger seat, eyes half closed. "You're not a perfect dog," I said, "but I'm not a perfect person either." Rex opened his eyes slightly, glanced at me, then exhaled as if, in agreement. And I realized, we're both old, chipped puzzle pieces, but we still fit together. If someone's willing to take the time to piece us back. I didn't know what compelled me to do it that night. Maybe it was the dream. In the dream, I saw Rex standing alone in a mist-covered field, still wearing his brass tag, his eyes fixed on a place I couldn't reach. I jolted awake, not from fear, but from incompletion. Rex was sleeping on Rusty's bed, his head resting on one corner of the pillow. I quietly approached and flipped the tag around his neck, this time to the backside. At first, it was just a worn, scratched piece of metal, so scuffed it seemed unreadable. But I turned on my phone flashlight, angled it differently, tilted my hand. Under the dim yellow light, a faint inscription emerged like a ghost in the night. 112 Maple Hill Road. An address, not far. I didn't know why, but it felt like I was holding a piece of a map, leading to the rest of an untold story. The next morning, I told Rex, though I knew he wouldn't understand everything. "We're going on a little trip today. Sound good, old man?" Rex lifted his head at the sound of my voice but didn't react. He just blinked slowly, as if to say, "I know." We left town before the sun had risen over the tree line. The road west was bumpy, narrow, flanked by open fields and unnamed forests. I didn't play music. I didn't need to. Rex's breathing was enough company. The house appeared after a bend in the road, a weathered farmhouse. Old but well kept. There was a creaky rocking chair on the porch, and an elderly man sitting there, leaning on a cane, his back slightly curved, eyes looking straight at us. I stepped out of the truck. No rush. Rex stayed in the passenger seat, watching every move, Good morning, I called, raising a hand slightly. I adopted a dog. There's an address on his tag, it led me here. The man didn't respond immediately. He just set down his teacup. Stood up slowly, every step like dragging stone. Was it? He rasped. Voice like late autumn wind. One cloudy eye, one golden, sun-scorched coat. I nodded. He walked toward the truck. Peered through the open door. Rex sat up straight. Didn't bark. Didn't jump. But his ears perked. Tucker, the man said. Not loudly. Not urgently. Just one word. And with that word, Rex let out a soft whine. Not of pain. Not of fear. But of recognition. I opened the door. Rex stepped down, slow as always, and approached the old man. No leaping. No tailspin excitement. Just leaned his shoulder into the man's legs. The man let go of his cane. Dropped to his knees like an old tree shedding leaves. And buried his face into Rex's, or Tucker's, fur with trembling hands. My son, he began. Then paused. Died 4 years ago. An accident. Since that day, I couldn't care for Tucker. I tried, but I broke. One day, he disappeared. I thought he was dead. We stood in silence under the porch roof. 3 souls. 3 stories. A man who lost his son. A dog who lost his home. And another man who thought he'd never be able to love again. I called him Rex. I said softly. The old name was gone, but he knew me. And now, I think he still knows you. The old man didn't reply. He just kept stroking the dog's back, as if trying to touch a time long past. Before I left, he pressed an old photo into my hand. A young man, holding a round-faced puppy. Both were smiling wide, like the world was still whole. On the back, inked in faded pen, Tucker, summer, 14. On the way home, Rex, or Tucker, or whatever name, slept more deeply than usual. I looked at the photo, then at Rex, and whispered, "You were once loved, and now, you are loved again." A week after that journey to the farmhouse, Rex and I returned to our usual routines. But something had changed. I no longer saw him as a strange dog with a mysterious brass tag. And Rex, ever since the moment that old man called him Tucker, seemed to have let go of something within himself. As if a lost fragment of his soul had finally found its way home. And now, he could breathe deeper. On Saturday afternoon, I took Rex for a walk around the neighborhood park, somewhere we'd never been because I usually avoided crowds. But that day was cloudy. The park was quiet, and I was curious to see what Rex would do in a world filled with children and soft-serve ice cream. A young couple crossed the lawn, their toddler trailing behind, clumsily holding a cone of soft ice cream. Then, predictably, the child tripped. The ice cream fell, shattered on the grass. The child began to cry, not out of pain, but from loss. A cry not dramatic, but it struck something deep inside me. Rex didn't need a cue. He walked over, not fast, not sudden. He sat down in front of the child. Gently, calmly, his ears relaxed, head tilted slightly as if listening. Then he licked the ice cream off the grass. The child stopped crying. His eyes widened, looking at Rex as if he had never really seen a dog before. Then he smiled, just a small one, but a real smile. The mother chuckled. He's got his own way about him, doesn't he? I didn't respond. I just nodded softly. His own way. That night, I sat on the sofa, phone in hand, and searched a phrase. Therapy dog program, local registration. I wasn't sure what made me so serious about it. Maybe it was the child. Maybe it was my own smile at the park. Maybe it was the fact that Rex had never said a word, yet the world kept speaking about him. I signed up for the first orientation session the following Thursday. The orientation was held at the Eastside Community Center, a sunlit room with folding chairs, a quietly hissing coffee maker, and a group of people each leading dogs older than you'd expect. Rex entered like an honored guest. He didn't bark, didn't shy away. He paused in front of each dog, gave a soft sniff, then moved along as if checking. Is everyone doing okay? An elderly woman with silver hair and red glasses approached me. You must be Diego. And this must be Rex? Yes, but I think I'm just the driver. He's the soul. She smiled. Then that soul's going to have his moment to shine. The test began. A mini vacuum cleaner hummed in the corner. Rex walked by as if it weren't there. A baby doll sat in a wheelchair, frizzy hair, arms limp, Rex approached, gently rested his chin on the footrest like he was offering comfort. Paper rustled, a drink spilled, someone dropped a glass. Rex didn't flinch. And finally, an older man, playing the role of someone crying, sat slumped by the window. No one told Rex what to do. He walked over, didn't bark, didn't sit, didn't lick. He simply stood there, quietly, and rested his head on the man's shoulder. The man hiccuped once, then laughed. The woman with red glasses leaned close and whispered, "He doesn't need training. He just needed a reason." I swallowed hard. I didn't dare say anything out loud. But inside, I knew. I didn't find Rex. Rex found me. And now, perhaps, he's ready to find others. When I signed my name at the bottom of the list at the end of the session, I wasn't just registering a therapy dog. I was signing my name into a new chapter. A chapter that begins with Rex. After the orientation, we were given a list. City Library, Maple Pines Nursing Home, the Veterans Center in the suburbs. I glanced at Rex, lying stretched out under the chair, eyes half closed, and thought, which one will you choose, old man? But then I understood, it wasn't about choosing where. It was about choosing who needed him most. So, we chose all three. Monday, City Library. The program was called, Read With Me. Children struggling with pronunciation or social anxiety would read aloud to a therapy dog. No judgment, no grades, just a pair of listening ears. Caleb was the first kid. 8 years old, glasses slipping down his nose, hands trembling as he opened Charlotte's Web. Rex lay down, resting his chin on Caleb's legs like a breathing pillow. The boy began to read, quiet at first, stammering, hesitant. But then, the voice grew louder, clearer. By page 3, Caleb smiled. By page 5, he turned to me and said, "I think, the dog's really listening to me." I nodded. "You're not the only one who feels that way." Wednesday, Maple Pines. This place was different. No children, just time standing still. Mr. George was the first person Rex chose. Not by chance. He sat by the window, always, never speaking. Just staring out at the empty courtyard with eyes as sorrowful as a winter sky. On the first day, Rex walked over and sat beside his legs. No touch, no pressure, just sat. On the second day, Rex leaned against him. On the third day, George gently placed his hand on Rex's head and said, "Just one word, thank you." I didn't know who he was thanking. But maybe, both of us. Friday, Veterans Center. This place was entirely different. Not noisy, but filled with a different kind of silence, the silence of old battlefields. Here, no one spoke openly about what they carried. But everyone needed someone quiet enough, so they could hear themselves again. Rex walked down the hallway like someone who'd lived there. A tall man with a silver beard to his chest, Hal, looked at Rex. Then at me. "So this the new recruit?" he asked. Voice gravelly. "His name's Rex. And yeah, the new guy." Hal bent down, his knees cracking audibly. "Hello, Dr. Rex," he whispered, stroking Rex's head. "We need someone who listens, and doesn't talk back." Rex just closed his eyes and sighed. A silent nod. We kept a steady schedule. 3 stops, 3 kinds of people, 3 kinds of pain. And Rex, week after week, visit after visit, walked into each life like he had once known them in a faraway dream. No one asked much about Rex's past. No one cared about his background or his former owner. Because Rex didn't come to tell stories. He came so that others could tell theirs, without fear of interruption. And sometimes, it's the silence of an old dog that rings loudest, like a bell awakening parts of memory long buried within people. Gently returning to them, a piece of peace they thought they'd lost. In my therapy notebook, I've started writing, Rex doesn't need to do anything, just needs to be there. And sometimes, just being there is the miracle. The story of Rex began to spread, but not in the loud way of clickbait headlines or viral videos. It spread in a quiet, deep, slow way, yet unstoppable. Like a smile passed from old Mr. George at the nursing home to Caleb at the library. From Caleb to his mother. From that mother to a schoolteacher. And then, a reporter from the Community Corner column of the local paper knocked on my door one Tuesday morning. "I heard there's a dog who listens," he said with a faint smile. I glanced at Rex, lounging on the porch, eyes half closed, one ear twitching at the sound of a passing garbage truck. You could say that, I replied. Just, no flash. He doesn't like being disturbed. The article came out that Friday morning. Front page of the local section. Bold headline. Old dog. New tricks. The story of a therapy dog who says nothing but heals everything. Photo. Rex lying beside Caleb. Head resting on the boy's leg. Eyes closed as if dreaming. Below the article was the closing paragraph. No one knows where Rex came from. But now, everyone knows why he's here. To do something few still have the patience for. To listen with the heart. A week later, I got a call from the shelter where I had adopted Rex. We've had quite a few calls. The staff woman chuckled over the phone. People want to adopt old dogs. They say they want a Reggie. I mean, Rex. I laughed. 3 dogs got adopted this week. She said. One of them was Mags, the old Labrador no one even looked at for 2 months. I paused, then said, Rex and I will come visit. We returned to the shelter on a spring afternoon. It looked different, not because the walls were freshly painted or the lights brighter, but because of the air. It no longer felt heavy like the months before. Like hope had passed through, and left behind the scent of freshly cut grass. Mags, the elderly Labrador, was getting ready to head to her new home with a retired bus driver. Rex walked up to her, touched nose to nose as if congratulating her. They stood there, silent, no barking, no running, just stood, as if they'd known each other in a former life. That day, I noticed kennel number 19, Rex's old enclosure, was now empty. But someone had attached a small wooden sign to the wire door. Hand-carved, Rex, adopted and loved. I stared at that sign for a long time. So long that Rex lay down at my feet. As if he sensed something inside me was shifting, something I hadn't yet named. When we got home, I did something I never thought I would do. I mounted a simple wooden plaque on the living room wall. I called it, the Rex wall. On it, I pinned a photo of Rex with Caleb. A thank you card from Maple Pines. A clipped piece of the newspaper article. A cloth collar embroidered with the word, listener. And at the center, the old worn-down metal tag I had taken off Rex's neck to keep safe. Beneath it, I wrote in small marker letters. If you're reading this, it means you were once loved. And maybe, you're being loved again. I don't know if these little things are enough to change the world. But I do know one thing. Rex's world, and mine, have already been completely changed. Not through barking, not through face licks or silly rollovers. But through the way he stayed, when no one else dared to. The way he listened, when everyone else only wanted to speak. And the way he simply showed up, when presence was all anyone really needed. Autumn arrived without warning. Mornings grew crisp. Leaves began to turn, drifting down onto the yard like vague signals of something quietly shifting. Rex changed too, not through fever or any visible symptom, but in steps just slightly slower, breaths drawn just a bit longer, and a gaze that, at times, wandered farther. I noticed, and I didn't rush to fix it. Not because I didn't care, but because I understood. Some things aren't meant to be cured, just accompanied. I called Dr. Penfield, the vet who'd seen Rex from day one. She arranged a quiet time slot with no other pets. Rex climbed onto the exam table with a slow dignity, like an old gentleman who didn't need help. She checked carefully. Teeth, heart, joints, eyes. He's still doing fine, she said, voice steady but reflective. Slower, yes, but nothing concerning. Then she paused, ran a gentle hand down his spine, and smiled. There's something brighter in his eyes. Do you see it? I nodded. Trust, I said, something I thought he'd lost a long time ago. That Saturday morning, I woke early, brewed coffee, and stared out the window. Rex was still sleeping, legs tucked, head resting on a blanket on the porch like a weary knight guarding a dream. I looked at the old photo on the Rex wall, a winter cabin shot from years ago. With Dad and Rusty, an idea sparked. Was it still there? The cabin? The old wood stove? The creek behind the trees? I called my younger brother. That old cabin, up on North Ridge, still standing? Last time we went, it was, he said. Why? I think Rex needs a trip. We left early Sunday before dawn. I packed light, a blanket, a few cans of soup, a thermos, my journal, and Rex's favorite portable bed for the porch. The old pickup rattled on the forest road, but Rex didn't seem bothered. Quite the opposite, he lifted his head. nose sniffing the air as if recalling something ancient, familiar, from another life. When we arrived, the cabin stood, still proud among the trees like a gatekeeper of the past. The wood had grayed, the door creaked, but it held. I opened the door. Dust rushed out like long sleeping ghosts. Rex stepped in before me. No hesitation. He walked straight to the fireplace, turned once in a slow circle, and lay down. Exactly where Rusty used to sleep. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, watching time fold into a perfect moment. That evening, I heated soup, poured warm water into a bowl for Rex, and sat by the window in an old armchair. Rex didn't beg, didn't nudge. He just lay there, quiet, like the autumn wind. When I whispered, "You've still got something to live for, don't you?" He lifted his head, glanced my way, and exhaled. A tired sigh, but real, like a smile that had aged. The next morning, we went to the creek. The path was buried in fallen leaves. But Rex led the way, nose to ground, ears perked, gait steady. At the water's edge, he didn't hesitate. He stepped in, took a few sips, then, suddenly, leapt and snapped at a floating yellow leaf. I froze. For the first time, I saw him play. Not to perform, not for anyone, just because he wanted to. Rex wagged his tail. He barked, once, then again, low and gravelly, but loud enough to echo over the water. I laughed, a deep, open laugh that rushed out like early autumn wind. "You're still here," I said, "and I'm lucky enough to see that." We stayed another night. The fire crackled gently. Rex curled at my feet beneath the chair, his warmth like a memory I thought I'd lost, now stitched back together with a cracked paw and a bowed spine. When I picked up my journal, I wrote only one line. Rex was once loved, and now, he loves back, by living again. I don't know what winter will bring, but I know this. That autumn, Rex lived fully once more. And so did I. Winter came slowly, as if the universe knew that old hearts need time to prepare. The maple tree outside the porch began shedding its leaves, one by one, like a quiet bow to bid farewell to the last light of autumn. I laid extra rugs by the doors and kept the fire going in the hearth. Rex, more and more, preferred lying close to it, head resting on my feet, silently as if guarding the world's sleep. December arrived, and everything seemed to slow. We still visited the library, the nursing home, the veterans center, but we no longer lingered like we used to. Rex began to choose when to leave. Exactly 1 hour in, even if conversations were still flowing, even if children were still reading, even if I was still steeping tea, Rex would stand. No fuss, no resistance, just a silent look toward the door. It's time, and I respected that. Perhaps Rex understood something we humans so often forget. That presence, though powerful, must be preserved through restraint. Staying too long isn't always kindness. One Sunday morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sky hadn't lightened yet. The house was still quiet. I made coffee, stepped out to the porch. Rex was lying there, like always, chin resting on my feet, breathing slow, warm, steady. I didn't say anything, just placed my hand on his head. "Tired, old friend?" I asked, not expecting an answer. His tail gave a soft wag. Once, then stopped. That day, I took him nowhere. We stayed home. I put on some jazz, lit the fire, and reread my notebook, the Rex journal. Page 58. Today Rex didn't move much, but the whole room still felt full of peace. Page 59. Caleb gave Rex an origami, said it was so he'd never be alone. Page 60. Rex isn't just a dog. He's a place people go when they have nowhere else to be. That evening, Rex chose to sleep in my room. Not in the bed, just outside the door, the same spot he lay when he first came to me. Like a silent sentinel, I left the door ajar. Didn't close it, didn't say a word. In the middle of the night, I woke. I wasn't sure if it was the wind, or something else, intuition. Maybe. I sat up, walked to the door, didn't turn on the light. Just moonlight filtering through the curtains. Rex was still there, still breathing, but slower, much slower. I sat on the floor, rested my hand on his back. "You don't have to go alone," I whispered. "I'm right here." One of Rex's eyes opened. The other, clouded and dim, stayed shut. That look didn't question, didn't fear, just asked one last thing. "You see me, right?" I nodded. I do. So clearly. And then, a long breath. One last exhale. No pain, no struggle. Just stillness. I didn't cry right away. I couldn't. I just sat there, my hands still resting on a body slowly cooling. Quiet as the last leaf falling in an unnoticed forest. The next morning, snow came. The familiar blanket I once brought to the cabin now wrapped Rex for the final time. I dug a small patch of earth beneath the maple tree. The one where he often lay each afternoon. Hard ground, but not frozen, as if the earth understood. I laid Rex down, placed the old metal tag beside him. The one etched with the words we knew so well. If you're reading this, I was loved once, but this time, I carved another line onto a small stone. And loved again. That afternoon, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand. No one rested at my feet anymore. But I didn't feel empty. I felt whole, because some kinds of love, even when they end, leave behind enough light for someone else to carry on. And Rex, in all his quietness, had become that light, a light that never goes out. I didn't put Rex's bed away right away. Nor did I rush to hide his old collar, or tuck the notebook back in the drawer. I left everything as it was. Because some silences don't need to be filled. They need to be heard. The following week, I still went to the library. Caleb was waiting in the usual reading corner, his book already open, but when he saw me walk in alone, he froze. Isn't Mr. Rex coming today?" he asked. I sat beside him, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, not today." Caleb looked down, turned a page, then whispered, "I made a card for him. I didn't get to give it yet." I held out my hand. He placed a folded sheet into my palm. On the outside, a drawing of a dog with big floppy ears. Inside, just one line. "Thank you for listening. You made my heart less afraid." Maple Pines fell quiet as I walked in. George, now using a wheelchair, was already waiting by the window. I handed him a printed copy of the photo of him and Rex. He looked at it, for a long, long time. Then he said. He never said anything, but when he sat next to me, I felt like I had never been forgotten. I didn't respond. I just placed a hand on his shoulder. Because I felt that too. The Veterans Center was the hardest place to return to. Hal was still there, his beard whiter, his frame heavier. He looked at me, then pulled out a worn piece of paper from his wallet. That college kid last year, the one writing his thesis on PTSD. He jotted down the first thing I ever said during group. I unfolded the note. Neat handwriting, slightly slanted. "I don't need someone to fix my pain. I just need someone to sit beside it." I blinked. Hal patted his chest gently. "He sat right here. Now he lives in here. Rex doesn't need to come back. He left what needed to be left." That night, I opened the Rex journal again. Page 61, a blank page. I wrote, "Rex didn't die. He became a moment. And everyone who ever touched his silence now walks with a little more peace in their steps." A few days later, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a folded note and a small wooden pendant carved in the shape of a dog, tied with thin string. The letter read, "I used to read to Rex. Now I'm studying psychology. Because I want to help others feel safe. The way I felt when he listened. He didn't just save me. He reminded me I was worth listening to." I hung the carved pendant on Rex's wall at home. Next to Caleb's card, the photo of George, and the old letter from the man at the farm. The one who once called him Tucker. Beneath the wooden board, I engraved a new line. A place where anyone can begin again. As long as someone stays beside them. In silence. One morning, as I walked through the park, a boy ran past me. Then suddenly stopped. He looked at me for a moment. Then asked, "Were you the man with the quiet dog?" I nodded, unable to hide my smile. He made me feel like I was okay. Even though I hadn't done anything yet. I knelt down, gently replied. He made me feel the same. That night, I sat alone. The firelight flickered softly. Wind slipped through the cracks of the window. The maple tree outside stood bare, its limbs reaching toward the sky. But I felt something. Not a sound. Just a feeling. As if Rex had quietly padded back into the house. Settled at my feet like so many nights before. I laid my hand on the rug. Felt nothing beneath it. But I knew. He was there. Not just as a dog. But as presence. An echo. A quiet breath that had stitched lost souls back together. And I thought, some loves don't need to be held onto. Because they never really leave. Winter passed slowly, leaving behind damp mornings and long nights that no longer frightened me with loneliness. I still rose early, just as I did when Rex was here. Brewed coffee, opened the creaky wooden door, sat on the porch, right beside the spot where he used to lie. I kept that habit as a promise. Not because I couldn't let go, but because I didn't need to. Some things don't have to vanish just because they no longer exist in form. Rex was one of those things. At the end of February, the city library called. "We're opening a new reading corner for autistic children," said the librarian, her voice both nervous and tender. "We want to name it Rex's Listening Corner. Would that be okay with you?" I was silent for a few seconds, not out of hesitation, but because something inside me stirred, like the first sunlight of spring brushing softly against the soul. "I think Rex would quietly agree," I said. They sent me a hand-carved wooden plaque. "Rex's Listening Corner, where you are already enough." At Maple Pines, George is now the one who hands out birthday cards to new residents. He still sits by the window in his gray knit cap. And every time I visit, he has a chair ready beside him. "It's for him," he says. Every time. I never sit in that chair. No one does. And strangely, it doesn't need to be filled. It's like a rest note in a song. A silent pause that lifts the music higher. One day, I was invited to a small event at an elementary school. Joel, the boy who once sat alone in the corner of the room with nameless anger, stepped up to the stage to read his very first short essay. The topic: a hero in my life. Joel read, "I had a friend named Rex. He didn't talk, but he made my heart stop yelling. He didn't make me be good or smart or brave. He just stayed. And because of that, I started to stay with myself too." The room applauded, but I sat still, eyes stinging. Joel had spoken for me, for so many others. What Rex never said, but always made you feel. You don't have to try so hard. You already are enough. On a quiet afternoon in early March, I reopened the notebook. 60 pages, full. Memories, words, gestures, final breaths. I wrote one last line. On the last page, Rex didn't just change lives. He connected them, and in silence, he reminded us that love is not an act. It is presence, whole, unconditional, reasonless. I began a new notebook as spring arrived. Not Rex's journal, but echoes, the reverberations of presence. I planned to write down what continued to bloom from him. Caleb becoming a reading guide for younger children. A young woman at Maple Pines starting art classes for reserved seniors. A psychology student writing a thesis titled Silent Presence, with Rex as the core example. Rex was gone, but the silent spaces he left behind had become scaffolding for countless people to begin again. He left no roar, no monument, just a glance, a resting form, a gently wagging tail, and a space where others could simply be. One weekend afternoon, I wandered past the old rescue shelter. The door to Kennel number 19 still held the wooden sign. Rex, adopted and loved. But below that, a new line had been added, written in a child's uneven handwriting. He was quiet, but I heard him. I placed my hand on the old wire door. And for the first time in months, I whispered, "Me too." And that was enough. A dog once forgotten had become a lantern that never goes out. In the hearts of hundreds who once walked through darkness. Not everyone comes to do something grand. Some simply come to stay. Not loudly. Not to take the spotlight. Not to prove anything except their presence. Rex was one of those souls. An old dog, slow steps, deep breaths, eyes that had once shattered. And yet, in his silence, he held the light steady for those who had lost their way in the dark. Diego once thought his role in life had ended. But he became a storyteller. Not through words, but through the passing down of memory, kindness, and honest breaths. That library still stands. That quiet reading corner. That wall called Rex. No one speaks of the dog as a legend. They speak of him as a friend. A refuge. A quiet part of the heart that, when touched, makes people feel a little more whole. Maybe you, too, once met a Rex in your life. Someone who didn't ask you to get better, but simply stayed when you weren't ready. And if you haven't met someone like that, perhaps one day, you will be that person, for someone else. This story doesn't end with a full stop. It simply steps back, to make room for someone new. To take up the light Rex once held. To continue loving, quietly, in the way this world needs more than ever. If someone once listened to you, without judgment, without fixing, just by being there, remember this: you were loved. And as Rex once proved, that kind of love never disappears.